you ever hear the tragedy of
Star Wars Battlefront 2?
No.
I thought not. It's not a story the Jedi would tell you.
Seeing the return of a game that came out 8 years ago has been surprising and awesome to see.
This is where the fun begins.
I don't think any of us were expecting to see the resurgence of Battlefront 2 in 2025, yet here it is. Will it be around for a while, or is it going to disappointingly last as long as Kit Fisto did against Palpatine?
Tragedy.
Now, Star Wars is in a league of its own, and over the years it's had its fair share of incredible games, such as The Force Unleashed, Lego Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, and the criminally underrated Episode 3 video game. Now, as great as those games are, I think the best out of all of them is the Battlefront series. Specifically, the original Battlefront 2. As great as this series is, unfortunately, it's had its fair share of tragedies over the years. The original Battlefront released back in 2004, and who could forget loading screens like this? Oftentimes I would find myself setting up a game just to see the loading screen. The maps were great, the gameplay was a blast, its major flaw was that you couldn't play as a hero or villain, you could just fight alongside them or against them. And they would not die. Battlefront 2 is the perfect sequel because it took the formula that made Battlefront so successful and added and improved upon pretty much everything. Including the ability to be the alpha of the battlefield. You could even do heroes versus villains on Tatooine, and if you were on Xbox, you could also do Bespin. It was the perfect Star Wars game, but that's where things get interesting. It's become more common knowledge that Battlefront 3 was just about completed when the plug was pulled.
Tragedy.
To make matters even worse, the plan for Battlefront 4 was for it to take place in an alternate universe with characters like Dark Luke, a post-Darth Vader Anakin Skywalker, and a Mace Windu that survived. It would have been amazing to see. It's an idea that I think would be great to explore, and a video game is probably the best way to do it. So Battlefront 2 releases in 2005, just a year after the first. We don't get the next ones for about 10 years, and then we finally get the reboot. It was a decent game, but there were only 6 heroes and villains, where the game that came out 10 years before had 17 heroes and villains. Unless you were playing on Xbox, then you could also play as Asajj Ventress,
nunchuck skills,
and our boy Kit Fisto. For me, that's the main thing that felt lacking. The games were limited to the era of just the original trilogy. It was kind of like what the first Lego Star Wars did, but just with a different trilogy. The first game itself looked great. It had a lot of elements that the first two did. I feel like it would have been better if it included more of the classic modes, especially Galactic Conquest. Things were looking on the up and up when Battlefront 2 was announced when we got to see the first trailer. It finally looked like we were going to get more than just a handful of heroes. And a campaign. And when the game released, surprise surprise, no one was a big fan of the loot boxes. I wonder why. The campaign wasn't as fun either. The only part that really stood out was the level that you got to play as Luke Skywalker in his prime. Now allow for me to get on my soapbox for just a minute, but this is yet another example of the fact that the reason why people are so interested in Star Wars is because it has amazing characters and an amazing universe, and we want to play the new games and watch the new shows and movies to go back to that universe and see the characters that we know and love from a different perspective. And we want to see them in a way that makes you appreciate them more instead of just having them completely changed to the point to where they're unrecognizable. It's why the ending of Season 2 of Mandalorian was so impactful, because it was one of the few times since the revival of Star Wars that we got to see a classic character the way that fans have always wanted to see. Anyway, even though Battlefront 2 was off to a rocky start,
just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this. And totally redeem yourself!
once the loot boxes were taken out of the game, you realized that it was actually a really good game. The progression system should have been updated a little bit more to account for the fact that you weren't going to have loot boxes anymore. But the game looks amazing, and even after all these years, it doesn't look like it's an old game. Battlefront 2 kind of faded out, and no one really knew when we would see another Battlefront release until...
This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill.
Now, I'm not a game developer, but I thought it wouldn't be too hard to remaster a game from 20 years ago. But this is one of the worst remaster releases ever. I've heard that it was fixed, but it killed all of the momentum and excitement that people had. I had a bunch of friends over to play some split screen, and unlike the originals, you can only do 2-player split screen. Now I know that split screen isn't really much of a priority these days because it's not very common, but it was in the original, so you would think that they would have included it at launch. There were also cutscenes from the campaign that were missing. Finding an online game was a joke too. Now I know that they fixed a lot of the problems that it had, but it pretty much killed the momentum. Fast forward to today, where Battlefront 2 is back.
Somehow, Star Wars Battlefront 2 returned.
I don't know if I've ever heard of a game hitting record numbers 8 years after its release, but it makes sense that it would be a Star Wars game.
It's Brittany, and I am back.
Now that it's back, it has everyone wondering if Battlefront 3 is actually going to happen. There have been developers that have said that they were more than willing to get the gang back together and make Battlefront 3, but the big problem is that at this point the game isn't in development, and with how long games take to make these days, we probably won't see a new game anytime soon. There's also the complications involved with licensing that, to my knowledge, is probably the biggest hurdle, and so because of that, it makes the resurgence a little bittersweet. I think it would be cool if they somehow added a big DLC to the game, kind of like Modern Warfare 2 and 3, where MW3 just built off of 2, and because of that, we were able to get a game a year after Modern Warfare 2 came out. Even though it was far from perfect, especially since it was a full-priced new game. But if by some miracle Battlefront 3 happens, there's a few things that they absolutely need to do. One is that one of the biggest complaints about the Battlefront reboots is that there was no galactic conquest in either games. It would be an easy way to hit a home run with the fans, especially if you made it available online. Smaller game modes like a 1v1 or 2v2, all heroes and villains, or even just regular troops would be a lot of fun. Especially if you could take fights that actually happened. Like Dooku vs Yoda, the Duel of the Fates, the showdown between Anakin and Obi-Wan, Princess Leia versus Jabba the Hutt, or even Anakin versus the Younglings. I also miss the space battles in the OG Battlefront 2. Bringing back original modes that haven't made an appearance since the originals would also be an easy win. I wouldn't mind a new story, but I don't think that it's entirely necessary, but it could open up a lot of cool possibilities if it's done right. Maybe the original concept from Battlefront 4. Speaking of that, if you didn't have a story based off of that concept, you could at least have them be available skins. I really wish something like this would happen. This is what I consider the best game set in the coolest story/universe, and let's be honest, Star Wars fans have been let down a lot lately, from how the sequel trilogy turned out,
Somehow Palpatine returned.
to how some of the shows have been handled, and to top it off, the Battlefront games have had the absolute worst luck.
No such thing as luck.
From the scrapped sequels to the terrible release of the Classic Collection, to the fact that there's so many people playing Battlefront 2 right now, and it probably won't be enough to get another game anytime soon.
Never tell me the odds.
I really hope that I'm wrong though. Let me know what you think down below. On this channel, I make videos about games that I love on a weekly basis and plan on doing more videos about Star Wars games in the future. Like one of my personal favorites, the Episode 3 game. Thanks so much for watching. We will see you in the next one.
Hello there.